So hello, hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for finding the time to join me for the next 30 minutes or so. My name is Annie Pettit and I am the Chief Research Officer at Peanut Labs, a company that specializes in DIY sampling, survey programming, and polling. You can find recordings of webinars we've done in the past on the Peanut Labs website under the Resources section. Now, today's webinar is about a very important topic in sampling. It focuses on how to figure out the right percentages of people to sample in your study. And if you've never used or never heard of Data Ferret, then you are in for a treat because this session is essentially going to be a demo of how to use Data Ferret. We won't use Excel or SPSS. So if you're worried about whether you'll be able to do this on your own, do not worry. All you need is access to the Data Ferret website and you will be good. So if you have any questions along the way, do feel free to type your questions into the question box and I'll answer as many of those as I can at the end of the presentation. All right, so first, just to make sure we're all on the same page, let me spend just a couple of minutes talking about various types of sampling. There are many different types, but I'll just focus on a few very basic concepts here and then we will press on. So first, there is random sampling. Now in many cases, this is the absolute best type of sampling you can do. The basic premise is that you have a list of contact details for every single person who is relevant to your study. It could be their email address, their phone number, their physical address, or something else. For instance, you might have email addresses for every single adult in the USA. Or you have the telephone number for every single woman who has a child aged 3 to 9. So once we have this complete list, we can then simply start picking names out of a hat to determine who will be part of our sample. Now, I'm sure most of us will never be able to create a list like that. It's pretty much impossible to have contact information for everyone, which means a true random sample isn't really possible. Now, stratified sampling is another type of sampling. The basic premise in this case is that people are divided into groups before you sample from those groups. So you might create a group of people who live in the city and a group of people who live in the country, and then sample from each of those two groups. The last type of sampling I'll mention is called convenience sample. Now, most of the work in market research is done with convenient samples. In other words, people who are easy to access. They might be easy to access because they live closest to our office building, or they have a telephone, or they've chosen to join a survey panel. Now, most of us in market research use stratified convenient samples. We sample from conveniently available people, and we start our research by bucketing them into groups for sampling purposes. So a sampling plan is important for every research project. We need to decide what kinds of people are relevant and important to our study. For instance, you wouldn't want to invite men to participate in research about feminine hygiene products, and you wouldn't want to invite teenagers to a study about retirement homes. When that happens, it's a waste of everyone's time and energy, and really it makes the research industry look kind of bad. But if we think ahead of time about who we need to take our studies, then we'll have much better data in the end. For instance, if we're going to run a study about diapers, we'll probably want to talk to moms who have a baby. You might want to talk to new dads as well because times are changing and dads are getting involved in those decisions too. Or if you're doing a study about learning to drive, you'll probably want to focus on younger people, people aged 15 to 20 or so. Now, let's take a specific example. Let's say we're interested in doing a study about people who are job hunting for their first real job. Now first, we can make some hypotheses about who we want to listen to. We've decided that we want to listen to both men and women, so let's say half of our sample should be men and half should be women. And let's also say we want to focus on young adults, perhaps people aged 16 to 29. Just to make sure we don't accidentally sample only 29-year-olds, we can easily divide that age range into 3 nice groups. And by doing that, we can then try to put a third of people into each group. And lastly, we might decide that we want to listen to people from all over the USA. So we can similarly divide the USA into 4 groups and then try to put a quarter of all people into each of those 4 groups. So what you see here is a sampling matrix, and it makes a lot of sense. We won't have to worry that everyone in the study is 29 years old or that everyone is from the Northeast. This matrix will ensure that we've listened to a good range of people. But is this as good as we think it is? Now, the most obvious problem is the first table that you see. In the first table, the sampling matrix we just built is the region part. We know that when most people divide the USA into 4 regions, there aren't equal numbers of people in each region. In fact, we know the most commonly used regions end up putting more people in the South region. So this means the sampling matrix we put together nice and quickly isn't really listening to enough people from the South. So what we could do is put a little more care and think about what young people aged 16 to 29 really look like. So if we think carefully, we might come up with a sampling matrix that looks closer to the one on the right. So we put more people into the South, and we put more people into the older age group. Now, unfortunately, I still don't know if this is what the USA really looks like. It's the best I can do with what I know, or what I intuitively think I know. But is this really the best? So if you're not already familiar with Data Ferret, it is an awesome tool put together by the census group in the US government. It's completely free to use, and it lets you look at and analyze a lot of data that the Census Department collects from its surveys. For instance, the American Community Survey, the American Housing Survey, the Current Population Survey, as well as population estimates and projections. So we are going to use Data Ferret to figure out exactly what our sampling matrix should look like. We don't need to guess because the U.S. Census Department conducts regular surveys to learn many things about its population, including their age, gender, education, income, family status, and a lot more. So instead of making educated guesses, the ferret, my friend the ferret, will fill in that sampling matrix for us. All right, so to start, I am going to click on Launch Data Ferret. It's a little bit picky about software, so you might find yourself needing to use a different browser, upgrading JavaScript, or allowing pop-ups. It's totally fine to allow pop-ups on this website. Another important thing is you really can't be doing other things while you wait for Data Ferret to load. It will just stop on you. So you do have to have a little bit of patience there. All right, the next step, they will ask you to fill out your email address, and as someone concerned about privacy, that always makes me nervous, but it is fine to do that. They don't send spam. They don't even check your email address, so you can put a fake one in if you prefer. That works unless you end up requesting that they email or download some data for you. When you get more comfortable using Data Ferret, and if you do use SPSS a lot, you can get a lot of benefit from downloading your files. But we won't go through that today. Okay. Then you will end up on this screen, and all you really need to do here is choose step 1. We want to choose which data set we're interested as well as the variables we are interested in. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you can see all the surveys that you're allowed to have access to. You can click through and peek at them all, but for our purposes, we're really just interested in the current population survey. So we'll scroll down just a little bit, find that survey, open it up, and then choose the most recent set of data. You can see here that they gather fresh data from this survey every single month. So if you really want to make sure your data is as accurate as possible, you could come here every month and generate the newest, most accurate results. Now once you click on the data set you want, you'll see a small menu pop up to view variables, and when you choose that option, then the list of variable categories that you see on the right side, that will appear. So for our purposes, we want to see the geography and demographic variables. It'll take the ferret a minute or two to find those variables, but then it will list them for you. And sometimes you will even get thousands of variables listed out there. Now fortunately there's only about 75 variables in the list we got, so it's simple enough to just scroll through and find the ones that we want. Now, sometimes you'll want to pick out 5 or 10 variables, but in our case we really just want age, sex, and region. Sex is just a little further down. So once I click on it, then I will get this strange little pop-up box. You just need to click on the select box and then the OK box. It's not really intuitive, but that's just how it is. So then you can choose select and OK for the age variable and the region variable. And actually, depending on how you choose the variables, it might let you pick all the variables at once. Either way, just make sure that your 3 variables have been selected. So now we can move on to step 2, where we work with the data basket or create a table. So here you see the 3 variables that we've chosen: sex, age, and region. On the right-hand side, you'll also see a section that allows you to fuss with the variables you've chosen, and that's what I'm interested in right now. Because there are 2 tasks I need to complete before I can move on to the next major step. So first, I need to recode the age variable into groups. The original variable that the Census Department gathers is actual individual age, 35, 44, 63, whatever it may be. So I need to create a variable that groups people according to their age. And I need to make sure it uses the 3 age groups that I'm interested in. So what I'm going to do is create an age variable like this. The first group is age 0 to 15. I don't really need that group, but I have to put these people somewhere. The second, third, and fourth groups are the age ranges that I'm truly interested in. And the 5th group is going to be people aged 30 and up. Again, I'm not interested in them, but for my purposes, I need to code them somewhere. And the second thing I need to do is create a variable for subsample purposes. So I need a subsample of people who are 16 to 29 years old. This seems a little redundant, but DataFerret won't let you use the same variable twice. So in this case, I'm going to create 3 separate groups. 2 of the groups identify people that I am not interested in, and one group, the 16 to 29, identifies the people that I am interested in. So I'm going to use this age variable to identify who is in my target group. So we'll hop back into DataFerret now, and you'll see on the right side there is an option to recode variables. So first I'll click on the age variable, and then I'll click on recode variable. So a pop-up will show up that lets me do the groupings. And I'll do this recoding sequence twice. Once to create the 3 age groups I'm interested in, and once to create the subsample group, just like what we saw in the last 2 slides. It's actually set up quite nicely, so there is minimal typing for you to do. All right, so now you can see all the variables that we need set up. There's the original age variable as well as the 2 new ones that created. So all that's left to do is select data basket, make a table. Now Data Ferret gives us this blank spreadsheet that looks like Excel, but it's not Excel at all. It's not a functional spreadsheet, so you can't just start typing and adding equations. We have to use the variables and functions that are visible on this page. So what we're going to do is click and move each variable onto the spreadsheet into the spot we want. So we just have to remember how we set up the sampling matrix before, and we're going to replicate that here. So this is our original sampling matrix with sex, age, and region. And once you click and drag each variable into the first column, this is what you'll end up seeing. Just make sure you choose the age variable that shows the 5 groups of ages. The one that splits the ages 16 to 29 into 3 groups, because that's really what we're looking to see. So now this is going to give us the breakout of age, gender, and region for every single person, even 13-year-olds and 55-year-olds, which is not really what we want. So the next thing we're going to do is identify the subsample we want to use. Now remember, we only want 16 to 29-year-olds, and right now it's showing everyone. So here's where we use the second age variable, the one we created just for the purposes of subsampling. And we're going to pop that variable into the top row. So now you'll see the 5 groups of age across the top, including the 3 groups that we are particularly interested in. So we're almost there. If we don't do anything else, Data Ferret is going to give us raw counts. It's helpful and it will do the trick, but there's a way to make things much easier on ourselves. And all we have to do is tell the ferret that we want to see percentages instead of raw numbers. So we'll click on that percentage button at the top. Make sure it's the column percentage, not the row percentage. And then we click on Go Get Data. So this is our lovely result. You'll see 4 columns, but we're really only interested in one of those columns, that 3rd column that shows the percentages for people who are in our target group, age 16 to 29. And what this table tells us is that in the USA, among people who are aged 16 to 29, 50.2% of them are male and 49.8% of them are female. And similarly for, age 16 to 29, we've got 27.7% of them are aged 16 to 19, 36.8% of them are aged 20 to 24. So this is what our group of people really looks like. This is what we need to include in your sample. Now for those of you who are familiar with weighting, this is also the column that you're going to weight your results to once you get your data back. So we've got this sampling matrix based on real data from the US Census, and then we can just pop it into whatever sampling system we're using. So for example, this is a screen cap of the Peanut Labs Samplify system. So you would type the percentages you got from Data Ferret right into here, and the sampling system would do its job to pull a collection of people who look just like this. So at this point, you're pretty much done. Of course, there is an unlimited number of sampling matrices you might need. Here's another one. I've added the metropolitan variable. I've also added in the Hispanic variable. So you can do pretty much anything, create any kind of matrix with data ferret. So let's think back to 15 minutes ago when we first started to think about our sampling matrix. We tried to make things fair by saying we wanted 25% of people to come from the Northeast. But then we realized maybe it's not fair at all, and maybe we should guess the number closer to 20%. But then when we look at real census data, we discovered that that number should actually be 17.9%. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but there are many cases where you just can't even imagine what the breakout should be. So now we've seen just how easy it is to get the right numbers instead of wasting your time searching the internet and asking your colleagues for their best guesstimate. So now that we know what the true census targets are, we can do any weighting we want. So using data ferret to get us the right sampling percentages means that we can also weight our data back to census results, just in case we didn't manage to get enough completes from one of the groups. All right, so that brings me to the end of my talk. I know it was a lot of itty-bitty details, so if you do have any questions, just type them in the box on the probably on the right of your screen, and I'm going to see just how many questions I can get through before our time is up. So let me just have a quick peek here at what we've got. Okay, someone is asking about weighting. What exactly is that? Sure, that's a great question. Sometimes you will find that even the best sampling plan doesn't work out perfectly in the end. Maybe you were trying to get responses from 100 men aged 16 to 19, but you only got responses from 80. It could bias the results to not include those other 20 young men in your results. So what we do in this case is to make the men we do have count just a little bit more. So instead of letting each person count as one person, we'll make each person count as 1 1/4. So it's not as good as actually having 100 unique people. I'd rather you go back into field and actually get those additional completes. But sometimes the real world just doesn't let that happen. There's another question. Is there a need to look at nested quotas, gender within age, within region, to make it more representative? That is a great question, and it's very common to do. The easy version of data ferret on the website doesn't permit that. It just lets you have some very basic one variable at the top, multiple variables down the side. But what you can do with data ferret, once you've chosen your database, once you've chosen your variables, you can ask to download that data file. And that file can be put into SPSS. And at that point, you're pretty much home free. You can do almost anything. So you could nest age and gender as the banner across the top, and then have any variables down the side in the column. So if you want just a basic sampling matrix, then data ferret online, the website, quick and easy, great thing to do. If you have a more complicated sampling matrix and you're comfortable with SPSS, visit data ferret, grab your database, grab your variables, and then download it into SPSS. All right, what other questions have we got? Okay, got a tricky question here. If our qualifying population isn't expected to perfectly reflect census data, let's say we're looking for people who exercise regularly, is there a way to use census data to help inform our sample design? Now, fortunately, the U.S. government collects data on all kinds of variables. So even if you're not really sure if it's relevant, do have a peek. There just might be a fitness variable in there. It could just be walking, it could be going to the gym, but some kind of basic variable. Do have a peek and see if it's there. Even if it's not there, and you're kind of stuck with that fitness variable not being available, it's still very important to understand what the basic population of the USA looks like. You wouldn't want to completely misrepresent age or gender or region if you don't have to. It's better to have a background understanding of what the generic numbers should look like, just to make sure you're not way off base. Oh goodness. Okay, I will answer this question. Someone is asking, I have a peanut allergy. Can I still safely access your site? Okay, yes, you can. Let's see, another question. You mentioned downloading a file. Why would you do that? Okay, so we did cover that. Why might someone download a file? So as I mentioned, if you're looking at a very basic sampling matrix with just one variable across the top and then the rest of your variables down the side, then it makes perfect sense for you to just use the DataFerret website. If you are doing something more complicated where you need multiple variables across the top, let's say you've got a group, you want to make sure you've got age and gender and region covered across the top, but then multiple variables down the side, then you will need to download the raw file so that you can manipulate it in your own unique way with SPSS. So I think we have reached the end of our time. The video will be on our website in the next few days if you want to have a peek at something again. On behalf of myself and everyone else at Peanut Labs, thank you very much for finding the time to join us, and I hope your sample weights will always be between 0.9 and 1.1. Bye everyone.